Okay, so we will have about 45 minutes for a debate from you. I do hope and I suppose that there have been some interactions during the coffee break, and I would like to invite you, in a sense, to come in. The speakers are more or less all here. Yes, Anna is also coming now, so that you can either ask directly to our speakers. President Lagos is also here, or you can comment, and we will then give also the floor again to the speakers, in a sense, to comment also very quickly. And this time there is no the rule of 5 minutes. This time there is the rule of 1 minute. I know in the European Parliament you have the rule of 2 minutes, where we will cut. We are in a conference, and we would like to give the utmost to nearly all of the tables or so that you come in. So please be short, be precise, and be also provocative, perhaps in some of your ideas. Yes, and then just present you very quickly. I do hope that my team is giving you some of the micros.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a minor point. Our German friend mentioned at one point 20 years of European foreign policy. It's a minor point, but on the level of periodization, I would have been personally tempted to say that 40 years already, because I believe a demarcation line in international relations and in European external relations occurred with the October War of 1973. The challenges, the unresolved nature of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the possibilities of overspill, economic, demographic, and security, pushed Europe then to start elaborating a common foreign policy, was the stimulus and the catalyst for the enhancement of political cooperation, as it was called then. They triggered the Euro-Arab dialogue, which was the first exercise, probably, of a region as big as Europe then and the Arab world, from Morocco to Muscat in Oman. It wasn't a major success, but it occurred for some 10 years. So I believe it's not unimportant, sir, to have an idea, a clearer idea of what was the periodization of European foreign policy, etc. Number two, I think at one moment we need to think, you more than we, on what was the impact of your debates 20 years ago about the options between the broadening of Europe or the deepening of Europe. I will not conceal from you that, being an observer of European realities, those who were in favor of the broadening, it's because they were allergic to the possibilities of the deepening. And to tell you frankly, Europe of the 9, Europe of the 15 had more external cohesion as a political player rather than that of the 27. You need to have some deliberation internal about cohesion, a sense of purpose, etc. And I'm sorry for the intervention, which was improvised.
So much. There was here, yes, our friend. But please bring also a bit in, perhaps, some of the debates you had during the coffee break or so, and not only individual, but I think this was a very valuable contribution you made. And
yes. We were discussing with my colleague precisely the issue of soft power. Now, I think we should not gloat too much about a European soft power, because this is not really the perception that in most parts of the world they have. Actually, soft power is based on strength, economic strength, and cultural influence. And we well know that most of the cultural influence is American, and that right now most of the economic influence is Chinese and or American. Actually, Europe is in a weak position as far as soft power is concerned, also because of its lack of credibility. The lack of strong institutions prevents having a credible soft power. I was talking with Mario Raffaelli about the role that Italy had in Mozambique, in the conclusion of the war in Mozambique, for example. There was some continuity in policy, so that after the war was brokered and peace came, there was credibility on the ground. Quite different the situation not only for Italy, but for the United States and other European countries in Somalia, where lack of credibility precluded soft power. So let's not forget, this is the point, that soft power means credibility. Credibility means strong, coherent institutions capable of maintaining a foreign policy in time. Now, these, as we well know, any state, the basic function of any state is foreign policy and defense policy of a state towards the outside. We are all well aware, but we should remember that Europe is not a state, is in the process of becoming a state, and so we still have to build the main principles of a foreign policy and of a defense policy. Otherwise, let's not fool ourselves. As far as defense policy is concerned, we'll always be, behind the initiative of the United States. If we want Europe to count more, we have to strengthen European institutions. This was the gist of the discussion I had. Thank you.
Yes, there was a... So you brought in the concept also with the old French concept of the politique régalienne, the politique régalienne. Okay.
Hello, I'm from European Students Forum. And the keywords that my ears caught today was about EU's neighborhood policy, Mediterranean strategy, Western Balkans, the Middle East region, and of course, Northern Africa. And I have a question. Was I mistakenly expecting to hear about Turkey's role in each and every point I have just mentioned? Because Turkey has a part, again, in each point that I have mentioned. So it's just out of curiosity. And maybe I had this because I am a Turkish-rooted European. And then I would like to raise another topic. When Ms. Bolini talked about Islamic movement, Islamophobia, I couldn't agree more with her when she said they invest on education. Exactly. And if you want an example, Exhibit A, Gülen movement. And if you haven't heard about this, the only thing I can say is, I guess, bonjour. And then the third point I would like to mention, when we talk about the values, the integrity of European Union, which is human rights, which is freedom of speech, which is democracy. Now, back in Turkey, which is a candidate country for, I don't have to mention how long, there are 600 students are arrested. Among them, I have my friends. There are more than 150 journalists arrested. And I'm curious how more shameful the situation has to get for Europe to raise its voice more about these cases. Because if Europe is talking about integrity and the values, and if Europe turns it back to Turkey, then as a youth representative, I will start questioning European values myself. And if I start questioning European values, that will be the reason why actually politicians losing its trust among its citizens. That will be the reason. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we will tomorrow have also some speakers from Turkey in our deliberations, so probably they will also bring in the case, but for sure I think the intervenants of this afternoon will also respond to your question. Yes, Mika and Daniel.
Mikko Majander, coming from Finland, Helsinki. I put a little bit geography in the picture as well, because here, for good reason, the emphasis has been on the Mediterranean and Southern Balkans area. But thinking about in terms of soft power and hard power, and I'm thinking about the Nordic region, and of course the key issue is the relation with Russia. And I'm not just talking about Finland, but the Baltic states as well. And I think there are rather nasty connotations to speak about hard power or soft power. Hard power was military confrontation. Soft power in Finland used to be called Finlandization, which was soft power against us in a way. And putting this background, I would say maybe the most valuable way to deal with Russia and cooperate is to very pragmatic things about economy and trade. And I think in this way it's a more constructive way to lower that kind of a frontline border that we have there than discussing things about hard power or soft power. Then again, in a trade policies, of course, EU is the partner, how the Russian trade is handled and negotiated. And there, of course, it's a huge asset for small countries on that borderline that you are not negotiating things like trade alone with a great power like Russia. Thanks.
Thank you very much also for bringing in this kind of problematic from the north. Please.
Thank you, Chairman, for giving me a word. My name is Ramzan Shamilov. It's a Belgium Association for Migrant Inclusion. For me, one of the best soft power instrument could be 20 million migrant society in Europe. 20 million more educated and more integrated the migrant society. What they should do, they own themselves, their modern ICT means, ICT tools, with our encouragement from environment, from neighbors, from employers, from politicians, from media, from NGO, from teachers in the school. And they should send this knowledge, technological knowledge, what they obtain here, back to their country. And this is the one of the soft power by me, because the NGO, the government, they can't improve situation. We see it last decades. And instead of hating them, lynching them, we should encourage them to be so. But how a refugee or a migrant can concentrate on learning, on integration, if he know what somebody hate him. So my call to Europe, stop hate migrant, stop hate each other. We have no solution beside living together. If we will follow nationalist ideology, what rise now and warming by some populist media, it will frap immediately image of EU like a fortress of human rights. It will break our economy. Our goods will be abandoned in many countries. We will lose safe trade way, and we will have a more expensive access to sources. Let's remember the history lessons, very bright history lessons, very sudden history lessons. And sorry for saying that if you wish to stop immigration, I think it should be stopped the sexual revolution a few decades ago. Now it is late. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please, Mika. And then afterwards, after the two speakers, we will go back to the intervenients who would like to comment, and then we will have a second round. Yes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Giacomo Cavalli. I heard very interesting contribution here today, and 1 minute would be not enough to answer to all these very nice topics I heard. So I will concentrate basically onto the first thing is like why our soft power is slowing down. I think that the interlink between the economic crisis and this process is quite evident. Our best result in achievement in soft power was the enlargement 2004 we had with Eastern countries.
The fact that the EU social model is still regarded in many regions in the world as a real model, as something which is attractive, give us a lot of, in my view, a lot of possibility to be more influent on what is going on in many regions. The fact that the EU is still looked at as a model of solidarity and regulation. But it may be odd to talk about EU solidarity in this very moment, but still, don't look at the EU budget and look at how it is used and for which purposes. And there is no doubt that in many regions, this notion of solidarity and regulation, which are at the heart of the EU project, are still extremely attractive, and we should not underestimate the power that all this gives to us. I'm not telling you that that's enough. It's clear that when you have to address a crisis anywhere, if you get the possibility to project a military force, it's better and you are more credible. But we should not underestimate, once again, the possibility which is given to us by our normative power, provided all this would be backed by the political will. And this is, if you think in very concrete ways, and if you look at the difficulties we face in front of a number of crises, Libya, in the case of Libya, the fact that we did not have the military means to really alone, as the EU, confront the crisis, in my view, was not the worst. Because even if we would have had the military means, the political unity was not there. You know where Germany was, and you know where France and the UK were. So even with the military means to act alone without NATO, without the US, if you don't have the political will and the ability to speak with one voice, you don't do anything. Even on your doorstep, in your neighborhood, let alone if we think about Sri Lanka or this kind of area. But even in Georgia, even in Transnistria, Moldova is a neighboring country. It's a European country. Are we really able to have a decisive role in Transnistria? Another conflict which is on our doorstep, where we are totally absent, Western Sahara. Where is the EU? And it's not a question of a lack of military means. It's a question of political will and ability to speak with one voice and to understand that our long-term objectives and interests are better served by common position in the EU. And in this regard, what you said about deepening and broadening the EU has played a role. It's clear that the enlargement has had many, many, many advantages to the EU. No need to elaborate on that. But it was already difficult at 15. You can imagine at 27. We talk about Russia. Our Finnish friends speak about Russia. A Portuguese and a Finn do not perceive Russia exactly in the same way, for good historical reasons. So it's clear that the enlargement has had deep consequences in the way we were able or unable to forge a common vision of our threats and our interests.
Could I just add a little thing on Libya? Libya is an incredible example that despite our flaws, despite our shortcomings, the people are looking at us. And every time I go to Libya, every people tell me, we don't want the Americans, we don't want the other Arabs, it's you Europeans we are looking for. You have to be the ones helping us in gaining the capacity that we need to build democratic institutions.
Thank you, Anna. Perhaps on the back, Will and Ronja and Tom.
With his provocative, but I think very good question about the 7-year budget. The proposal at the moment has 51 billion euros for aid. That's a good part of it. It has 80 billion for innovation, also positive. It's where future growth in Europe will come from our human capital and infrastructure. But there's also in there 250 billion for the common agricultural policy and 250 billion for the cohesion and structural funds, much of which is used badly and not accounted for adequately. So I'm not here to speak on behalf of the reactionary government that represents me in the UK, probably the most reactionary government in relation to the EU that we've had since we entered. They, I think, have no ambition at all to go into the negotiations and put the rebates on the table in exchange for reform. I think that 7 years ago, Tony Blair was interested in doing that, but held back by others in the Labour government. And that a Labour government in the future, perhaps 7 years from now, should really do this because our rebate is 4 billion. It's not a significant amount of money. And if we could leverage that to get a serious reform of CAP, perhaps even saying it should be down to individual countries what they want to do with the agricultural subsidies and nothing to do with the EU. And meanwhile, we'll use this money for our soft power through aid and other means and to make Europe competitive through innovation. That would be great.
Thank you, Will. Ronja, perhaps?
Yeah, well,
Thank you.
Perhaps on the Russia issue, because Germans are all. I'm often challenging you.
Yes, exactly. Again, we don't have interest. No, I'm kidding. But maybe just to give me some time to reflect on the Russia question, maybe just a quick answer to 40 years or 20 years of European foreign and security policy. Well, institutionally speaking, of course, harmonization of foreign and security policy started in the 1970, to be really precise. And then, of course, we had the Maastricht Treaty in 92, where for the first time we were speaking about the development of a common foreign and security policy. But I think the really kind of shift when it comes to really to the need to define a common foreign and security policy was after the breakdown of the Cold War, because up to then we were, the means of Europe and European states were just to defend our national territories. Apart from that, we had not so much influence on international politics. With the end of the Cold War, things changed, and all of a sudden Europe was in need of defining some common ground when it comes to foreign and security policy. And I think this is exactly the difficulties we are still facing 20 years on. We still haven't managed to answer the most pressing questions. It's a scandal to me that we haven't been able to renew our security strategy, which dates from 2003, which was written right after the events that have taken place when it came to deploy military means or use military force against Saddam Hussein. So for nearly 10 years, we have constantly avoided asking ourselves and answering the most pressing questions. What is European security and defense policy and even foreign policy all about? What means do we want to have in order to make a difference? All these questions, they are not new, but they remain on the table. And once again, I think it's really a scandal that politicians, and especially also in my country, in Germany, aren't willing to really face these questions. And once again, we had to step back from reformulating a European security strategy. And of course, one thing one big elephant in the room is Russia and the relations we want to develop with Russia, because out of probably all of the strategic partners that we have so far when it comes to European Union's foreign and security policy, Russia is a bit apart. It's not Europe per se, but it's not comparable to other strategic partners, like for instance Brazil, India, or China. So this is of course one of the most pressing issues that we have to solve, and also I can't find a way on how to define a 27 European position on Russia.
Yeah, follow up on Russia and the Baltic states. I completely agree with what Mr. Bhaskar from India said. He was also disappointed in the way that Europe used its power. I'm not against hard power, but it seems that Europe clings to some of these hard power instruments, and I'm sorry to come back to the nuclear weapons, but the tactical nuclear weapons, American nuclear weapons, are still in Europe. They're from the Cold War, anachronistic. There's no military utility for these weapons. There's quasi consensus in our countries, in Belgium, in Germany, in the Netherlands. Massimo D'Alemo also wrote an opinion article on this in Italy, I believe. But despite 3 reviews inside NATO in 91, 99, 2010, despite a defense and deterrence post-review from 2011, 2012, no change. No, these weapons, they keep them here in Europe. For what reason? No? Apparently because of the Baltic states, that they're afraid of Russia. So we apparently failed to reassure the Baltic states, even despite membership of NATO and the EU. A comparable example of hard power is missile defense. Now we are spending money, and a lot of money, I'm talking about $10 billion a year. In total, more than $250 billion. That's a lot of money on missile defense, which is a military solution for a problem that does not exist and that does not work. No, this in a financial crisis. I don't understand why the Europeans now agree with the Americans to install this in Europe. It doesn't work, and it costs a lot of money.
Thank you. Yes, Uday.
I'm sort of encouraged by the remarks made by Tom on this subject. I want to pick up from where I'd left off, and I'm really taking the liberty of this opportunity saying that we have this galaxy of political leaders and intellectuals, academics of the European Union and the Social Democrats. On the nuclear issue, I'll repeat this point that I believe personally that Europe has abdicated, meaning that you accepted the nuclear narrative that had become the dominant theme in the United States, which the United States in turn, I think, was pursuing apropos its relationship with Moscow, et cetera, which is a completely different subject. I'm sure maybe the German Marshall Fund will discuss that subject. But for Europe, whether it is the proliferation of WMD or the linkage with a non-state entity, which if you read the US QDR, it's always bullet number 1 and bullet number 2, I think the ecosystem of the world would have benefited from a European view. And that European view has to come from the political leadership with the kind of support that the academics and the analysts would provide. And I have said this many times, but in vain. Can Europe define nuclear sufficiency? What is the index of nuclear sufficiency? And those who worked in the field are aware, a national missile defense is a bogey. I say this with full confidence of having studied that subject. Therefore, these are the kind of discourses, to use the academic jargon again. I think the EU would benefit internally if you are able to encourage your own narratives, your own discourses, and then arrive at your decisions. Every politician, whether you're an MP or a minister, you have to go along with the national interest and what the people have to say. But you can help them to define it in a more equitable way. That is my plea to the EU, that please create your own narratives and believe in yourself. I would like to offer a slight dissenting view that European Union does not have soft power. Sir, with due respect, I don't think soft power is an index only of your financial and economic capability. I mean, if you read Joe Nye, there are types and types of soft power. EU and values should not, I think, be diluted. I'll just leave it at that for now.
Well, perhaps I might just pick up on two points. The first on Turkey and the second on the nuclear issue. On Turkey, I think you're very right to raise this. There is a real irony here, I think, that as Turkey has become a more interesting, important, effective soft power, in fact, in its own right, the distance between Turkey and Europe on so many things has actually grown. Does that mean that there is no future for Turkey's accession or Turkey in Europe? I don't think so. I certainly hope not. It's a very long-term project. And I have to think, if you look at the sweep of Turkish history, that one of the great engines of Turkish modernization and Turkey's, modernization, but Turkey's change has really been the attraction of Europe. And yes, we're in a difficult period at the moment, but I don't think we should give up on that. On the nuclear issue, again, I think, speaking of ironies, I think there's another irony here, which is that, in fact, the most conservative members of NATO when it comes to changing nuclear forces and doctrine are not to be found in the United States. They're in France, they're in the UK, they're in Turkey, where the Turkish view is basically don't take anything away, don't change anything, leave it all in place, etc. Many Americans, certainly this current administration, would be happy to see deep cuts in nuclear forces, and they would be more than happy to see the removal of tactical nuclear weapons from Europe. But there are plenty of Europeans who don't like it because they see it as a slippery slope to having to dismantle their own arsenals. So the point being that I think you're right to signal the issue, but there's a lot of blame to go around.
Thank you. Thank you, Jan. I think we should have 5 minutes very quickly before giving the floor to our rapporteurs. If there are some other questions from you which you have discussed, so I will give two remarks or questions if there are still. Yes, sure.
One question.
one question.
For tomorrow.
For tomorrow.
Because I think we risk to talk about the European soft power bypassing maybe the core issue, which is the relationship between European Union and United States. Because the European soft power works only when Europe is able to influence the American decisions. And otherwise, European soft power cannot work without a strong relation with the United States of America. I can give some examples. Iraqi crisis. Europe split in front of the American unilateralism. And finally, Europe lost any influence. Neither the European which followed the United States, nor the other which opposed, were able to exert any concrete influence on the crisis. And that means that the relationship between EU and the United States is a pillar in the international scenario. And the best performance of Europe were when we were able to influence concretely the American policies. Sometimes difficult. Can I conclude by an episode of my experience? It was during the Lebanon crisis. At the end of the Lebanon crisis, Europe played an important role. Soft power, hard power, well, finally we were actor for peace, deploying an international force between Lebanon and Israel, and it was made by Europe. Well, Italy, Spain, and France were the front line, but in a framework of an European decision, it was possible because at the end, the United States accepted. And I remember I went to Washington and I said to Condi Rice, finally, I understand what is globalization. Globalization means that in order to have a common position of Europeans, I have to come to Washington to negotiate with you. But before coming to Washington, in order to know what you can do, I had to pass for Jerusalem. This is globalization. About Middle East. In order to unify Europe, the United States is needed. In order to know what the United States can do, unfortunately, you have to ask to the Israeli government. This is why, up to now, it's impossible to find a solution. Thank you.
Thank you.